In this class I want to talk about data collection and also about some data collection techniques. The first question we need to ask is why do we collect data? Well, the simple answer is generally we need to get information. Now, this information could be to monitor the progress of something, to see how well it's doing, or to evaluate performance, again, to see how well it's doing and to keep an eye on a project to make sure it's running smoothly and functioning correctly. It could also be to make sure we're using resources effectively, as in, for example, stock control. It could identify some needs, perhaps areas that the organization or the business is not addressing at the moment. It could also assess the success or failure of projects. Sometimes projects are not judged as failures, they're allowed to run, when in fact information would suggest that perhaps they should be abandoned. So it's an ability to try and assess the success or failure of a project, if it's been a big success or a failure, or sometimes it's been a failure and not been recognized as being a failure. It also helps in decision making, for example in investment, making investment decisions. And it helps with planning. It's almost impossible to plan without information. The plans must be based on something. So let's look at some commonly used procedures for data collection. Well, the first one is we can collect data from an experiment. The natural sciences are very good at this, physics and biology and so on. It's not so much done in business. We don't experiment so much, but for completeness, it is a way of collecting data, so it deserves a mention. Second are surveys. Well, these are important in business, and we do know that surveys are a great source of information. For example, we could look at the census, look at the entire population, whatever the population is, whatever the relevant population is. The relevant population could be the output of the business. If the business makes light bulbs, then the census of those light bulbs, or a view of the entire population, might be possible. Generally speaking, it's not. So what we do is we take a sample. We also look at information in between, looking at the full extent of the information available. We look at what's in between, and we try to interpolate what's happening between one census and the next. We could have in-depth or detailed sample survey. We could have quite an extensive sample survey. That's a good form of information. The reliability of a sample depends on the sample size and also how it's selected. So the bigger the sample, the more reliable it tends to be. So you could have an in-depth look at sample survey techniques. Or it could be just a quick one, a quick count of a quick sample, a quick count of what's happening within some quickly chosen sample, just to give a snapshot of what's happening. So looking at output in a business, they may decide just to pick every 20th item and just have a quick look at it and make sure it's okay. So that's possible. We also have observational facts. We make observations with our eyes. We use our senses to judge, and it's quite a valid form of picking up data and of data collection. It wasn't properly recognized until probably the 1960s or 70s, when participant observation was taken more into the mainstream of subjects like sociology and psychology, but it is a valid form of data collection. There are lots of checks and balances that have to be applied before it's used effectively. We have to make sure there's no prejudice on the part of the observer and make sure that the situation being observed is not being contaminated almost by the observer. Sometimes when people know they're being observed, they perform and act differently. Interviews are quite a common one. Conducting interviews, so we get information from there, or from focus groups. A focus group is just simply getting a collection or a number of people with opinions about a certain product or a certain process or a certain issue, getting those people to meet and discuss and see what the outcomes are from the discussion. Now let's look at the steps in data collection. Well, first of all, we need to identify the objective. Clearly, if we don't do that, we don't do anything. So we need to know what we're doing. So we need to identify the objective. Second, we need to recognize that we need a target population. This could be the output of the business. It could be the products made in the business, or it could be some other issue. It could be a consumer group, a particular consumer group with certain demographics. We need to set a time frame for the activity. It must start and it must end. If it's open-ended, it'll never happen. Chances are it'll just drag on and drag on. So there's got to be a hard and fast end date. We need to know how we're going to do it. What data collection instrument? Is it going to be focus groups, interviews, a survey, questionnaire? What is it? So you need to identify the most appropriate data collection instrument. And what method? How are you going to do it then? If you're going to have a focus group, are you going to have just one focus group? Are you going to have several? Are you going to have them in a particular place and ask them questions? Who's going to facilitate the focus group? If it's questionnaires, how are they going to be piloted and so on? So it's a question of making sure that there is a proper sampling design, making sure that it is as robust as is possible under the circumstances. Also, before anything happens, staff have to be trained. It's not survey information or focus group information or participant observation, whatever it is. It's not going to happen unless the people conducting it have been trained. Otherwise, the information coming back will not be reliable. When the information does come back, it should be pre-coded. It should be in a form that's easy to analyze. And the whole exercise should have been tested at the outset, like a pilot survey. If you're going to conduct a survey, it's wise to have a pilot survey to iron out any issues in the wording of the questions, in the sequence of the questions. It's always wise to have a pilot survey to try and sort out the issues. So a small pilot survey to try and identify and criticize the process, then make corrections and then deliver the full thing. And when all of that's done, it's possible to perform the field survey, go out and actually do it. So those are the steps in data collection. Now let's look at survey questionnaires. Well, when we do this, when we use this form of data collection, we should be careful of the type of question structure. We have to make sure that the questions are capable of being answered. Sometimes people use compound questions. Do you believe that the company should do this, or do you believe the company should do that? But that's two questions. It looks like one, but in fact it's two, and it's complex, and it's likely not to get a good answer. It'll confuse the respondent, and the answers given will not be that reliable. So are the questions, should they be open-ended? Open-ended are flexible. They allow people to give their opinions, and the strength of the opinion can be picked up. The strength of the emotion about this certain issue can be identified. Closed questions, yes or no answers, or do you like, dislike, or whatever. These sort of answers are closed. They're easy to use and to analyze, but they don't reflect the strength of opinion. You have to be careful about the phrasing of words. It's easy to compose a question that we think is suitable and yet may offend people, or it may confuse people, it may intimidate them. They feel that the wording is intimidating because they don't know what the words exactly mean. So getting good wording for questions, ones which are widely understood, is an issue. That's why piloting the work is such a good idea. The layout of the questions is also important, making sure that they follow a sequence or a theme. If the questions are jumping all over the place, the respondent's going to get a bit disorientated, a bit confused. Jumping from one topic to the next and back again doesn't seem very professional. It doesn't seem very organized, very well thought out. And what sort of prompts can you give to the respondent in helping the respondent to answer? It might be a sample of the product, if it's a product, might be useful, or some illustrations, or some pictures, or something to help in the decision making. You've asked a question, the respondent is trying to answer it, giving the respondent some support in answering, not biased. It's very important that the aids do not bias the answer, but in certain circumstances where the possibility of bias has been reduced, it may be possible to use some prompts to help the respondent answer the question. So it's possible to give aids and instructions to the interviewer in a way that enables the interviewer to prompt the respondent. So the interviewer, it's part of the interviewer's training, but aids and instructions to the interviewer are also important. The interviewer must know how far he or she can go in helping the respondent. But then again, the questions should be easily understood. That's one of the points we made earlier. If the questions are easily understood, not a lot of work needs to be done in this area, in the area of supporting the respondent. Okay, so now starting the questionnaire. Well, quite simply, write down the most important aims of the study. I mean, what exactly is the whole exercise about? What's the outcome? What are you trying to achieve? Identify the main sections in the questionnaire. There may be an introductory section, a main body, and a conclusion. Just make sure that there's coherence in the way it's done. And make sure that the questions can be asked. For example, don't ask something that the respondent would have to have expert knowledge to answer. Would have to have detailed expert knowledge. Be reasonable with the questions. Make sure that the questions are capable of being answered. It's not an academic test. This is a way of getting information to meet the aims and objectives of the study. So the idea is not to intimidate the respondent, but instead ask questions that are capable of being answered. And you might have to revise, step 3 it should be, against the aims and objectives. So that particular point says step 4, it should be step 3. Step 3 should be constantly worked in the context of step 1 to make sure that the aims and objectives of the survey are what is being questioned. Everything else is broadly irrelevant. The information picked up, of course, has to be recorded, and that's sort of a basic process, a basic way of starting that questionnaire approach. Now, check if every question is clear and unambiguous. That's very important. Make sure that the questions are clear and unambiguous. So, clearly understood, capable of being answered. Keep the questions short and simple. It's not an exercise in showing off or using intimidatory language, large sophisticated expressions requiring expert knowledge. It depends, of course, on who you're interviewing, but for a general interview, let's say amongst consumers about a given product or given service, keep the questions short and simple. Make sure that it's a reasonable question to ask, and also decide whether it's going to be open or closed. If it's a reasonable question to ask, so it goes forward, the next one is to make sure that the question is either appropriately open or closed. Do you want people's opinions, so it comes back in sentences, or do you want a closed question which comes back as a yes, no, don't know, like, dislike, neutral, whatever? These are the two types of response that are likely. And then code the questions, and code the answers, I should say, as well, so that structure for analysis is being worked out. If you're asking for attitudes, then scales have to be devised. The most popular one is the Likert scale. But a scale of some form, like, dislike, dislike a lot. So it's a question of designing the scale on a scale of 1 to 5. Do you like this product? On a scale of 1 to 5, do you think this product looks nice, or whatever? So scales might be required. And finally, make sure that the interview doesn't take too long. People get bored. They get fed up after a while, and eventually they may be polite and just tolerate the questions. If it's a long questionnaire, tolerate it, but they're not really paying attention. They're not being serious, and the last part of the questionnaire, the responses to the questions there, are not reliable. Now, the phrasing and wording of questions, well, ask, generally speaking, short, specific questions, ones that are capable of being answered, and put in an accessible form. Easy questions to understand, make them short. Simplicity. Use everyday words. Don't use technical language. It intimidates the respondent. They don't know what it means. Then you have to explain, or the interviewer has to explain the situation. That's not It's not good. Always ask just one question at a time. Don't rush in and try to get it all done at once. One question, make sure there's an answer to the question before moving on. The answer to the question maybe don't know. Fine. At least you've got a response, then it's possible to move on. Avoid, as I said earlier, avoid double-barreled questions. Avoid, do you believe this or this or this should happen if this happens? Because you've got too many options here. The respondent doesn't know which one they're answering. So instead of having 2 parts or 3 parts to a question, have 3 questions. Frame 3 questions. Perhaps when you've asked one, it rules out the other 2, so you branch away from those 2 questions. They're not asked because they're not relevant. So avoid that situation. And make sure there is a time frame for the whole thing. Make sure that the questions are not unduly long, and make sure that the whole exercise is only going to take 10 or 15 minutes maximum. Depends, but generally speaking, keep it short and make sure that you tell the respondent at the start, this exercise will at most take 10 minutes. Thanks for your time. And try to stick to that. Be as neutral as possible. The questionnaire should be quite neutral. It should not have bias. The wording should be carefully selected to give the respondent the freedom to pick whichever direction he or she wants to go in. The wording should not lead the respondent down a particular route, because that would be bias and the exercise would be futile as a consequence. The questionnaire layout, well, it should be easy to use. It almost goes without saying. There should be guidance and reminders to the interviewer. When the questionnaire has been designed and it's on a clipboard, there may be the possibility of, in the sidelines, in the just away from the question, have a little box where there are prompts that are permitted or some guidance on how to support or encourage the response without biasing the answer. So guidance can be put on for the interviewer. So the interviewer on the clipboard has got some acceptable processes, allowed processes in the exercise, and they know how far they can go because it's written into the box. Prevent confusion. Well, the questions should not jump all over the place, as I said much earlier. The questions should be logical, it should be in sections, and the respondent, the interviewee, should know that the theme is now on this, there are some questions on it, now the theme has changed and there's some more questions on this, but they're grouped. They're grouped within those headings. It should be instructions both for the respondent and for the interviewer. Instructions as to types of questions and the way it will be answered, and the whole process, how it's going to be conducted. So both parties know that this exercise, this perhaps short exercise, maybe 10-minute exercise, these are the rules of the game. The interviewer will ask a question and the respondent will give an answer, and it's as simple as that, but nothing more than that. So there's no bias. Excuse me. It must be easy to interpret the answers. If the questions are straightforward and easy to understand, it's likely that the answers are going to be easy to understand as well. But there should be straightforward responses. And it's important that the people doing the analysis subsequent to this will be able to understand the responses quite easily. Now the question sequence, well, this must the respondent must understand the sequence of the questions. They must know which section they're in, the introductory section, the main section, the concluding section, the end section. They must be motivated to answer. If the respondent is not motivated, it's not going to go anywhere. So they must want to help. And the questions should be designed in a way to maintain interest. So the respondent is answering questions and they're motivated to answer the question, but they're interested. They're interested in the topic. That means they will try harder to concentrate and give valid responses, good responses. Should enjoy the interview. It's not an exercise of fun, but it shouldn't be torture. It shouldn't hurt them. It should be something that they quite enjoyed. The interviewer instructions, well, the interviewer should be very well trained and briefed on what is required. The questionnaire, how to use the questionnaire should be understood during the interview. As I said earlier, it's possible to write in the margins, little boxes perhaps, write additional instructions about the questions or what the interviewer could say or what words are allowed as a prompt if needed. If not needed, ignore. So it's possible to support the interviewer with not just training but with some additional support on the questionnaire itself. It might be that some information or some additional prompts could be used to serve as a reference point so that the respondent is clear what is meant by the question. But that should only be used if there is obvious ambiguity in the answer, in the context of the question, or if the respondent looks confused or is not sure about which way to go. Then it may be possible to say, here is a reference point, here is an example, and in this example that would be the answer, this would be the way we would think about it. So the interviewer needs to be trained and skilled in those areas. Now, data management, having conducted the whole exercise, well, the questionnaire, it should have an identification number. That makes it easy, particularly if there are several questionnaires running at the same time in the office. So there should be a particular one which marks it off and which means it can be easily referred to. The questionnaire will need editing to make sure it's appropriate before it's used, and afterwards to ensure that it can be coded easily and the results taken out. To that end, a coding sheet should be developed. A coding sheet may say question 1 and look at the answers that were permitted and code. If it was a scale, let's say question 1 was a scale, on a scale of 1 to 5, do you like government policy on this issue? And people said 4. Then it may be possible to write the 4 down, and so it's coded. That's a 4, and that can be used for analysis. Making sure that the 4 is understood to be quite good requires a code book. So the code book would say question 1, 0, very bad, 5, very good, 4, quite good. So the code book interprets the results. And there should be some method of data management. There should be some structure onto how it's going to be analyzed and presented. And the most appropriate one for the given exercise should be identified and should be approved and understood by management as well as by all the other interested parties even before the exercise takes place. Say, this is what we're aiming to get, this is the outcome we're trying to achieve. So the methods of data handling could be, well, it's tallied by hand. It might be, if it's a small exercise, perhaps maybe 20 or 30, it might be possible to do it by hand. So it could be done by hand sorting, that sort of thing. If it's more sophisticated, of course, we would expect some sort of electronic support. And there are many data packages, questionnaire packages available both online and as downloads, which would help to perform this exercise. Rules for the preparation of a questionnaire. Well, every questionnaire must include information about the person being interviewed. It doesn't have to be deep personal information. It could be just the person was interviewed at 11:45 a.m. In this location. The person was male, approximately 40 years old. You don't have to ask people's age. People find that personal and intrusive. But if it's relevant, the interviewer could make a quick note, just look and make a guess. Could be young, middle-aged or old. Perhaps that's all the categories that are required. Or maybe the questionnaire requires filtering from the start. Maybe they're only stopping people of a certain age. So it must include information about the person, but it doesn't have to be asked because it's personal and it's a bit rude to ask people personal information. It also alienates them. But the time and place of it and the gender of the person and whatever else the circumstances surrounding it, that information, those bits of information could be collected. So for example, the date of the interview, and an identification is usually put at the beginning of the questionnaire. So right at the top, to make a note of where they are, the time, the date, and whatever bits of information they wish to insert there. As I said, the questions must be short, simple, and easily understood. Those are crucial preparation points for a questionnaire. Only important information should be asked. No point in asking for trivial information. Again, it annoys the respondent. They get alienated, they're wasting their time, you're asking silly questions. So only the important. Keep it focused. Every question's important. And trivial questions have been removed. The pilot study even will help with this exercise, removing trivial questions. Try to deal with familiar matters, ones where the respondent knows what the information is. They've had experience of it, or they're in the position to answer the question. So start the questionnaire with questions that are easy to answer and deal with familiar ones. So looking at the structure of the questionnaire, the starting questions should be easy to deal with. Coming up to the main body of the questions in the next section perhaps, which are a bit more detailed about the product, and then some concluding questions, running it out. And make sure the whole exercise does not take a long time period. Leave plenty of space on the questionnaire form to write down the answers and make notes. If the writing space is short, the questionnaire is going to look messy, and coding it later and analysing it later is going to look pretty bad. It's going to make a big job for somebody down the line. So make sure that there is plenty of space on the questionnaire form itself for ad-libs and general comments and general observations. Okay, so those are issues mostly about questionnaires, but about data collection. I didn't get into detail about participant observation or some of the other techniques. These will be the subject of other classes, other videos. But for the moment, that's all we really need to deal with in the context of this overview of data collection techniques. And that concludes the video, so thank you for watching.